everyone, welcome back. I've got a P-61B Black Widow for you today. This is the HobbyBoss 172nd. It's one of those planes that's a bit strange and definitely not as well known as many of them floating around. However, it's probably one of the more important ones historically. Effectively, it was basically one of the very first stealth aircraft, and so that has a lot of historical importance. So for example, the nose cone was originally plexiglass because of the radar, switched to fiberglass. There was a lot of experimentation and testing with plastics and so on in this plane. Even special paints to try and keep that reflectivity down. So as I say, it was historically an important plane. I might even add some extra details in another video on this one. The kit itself, it's okay. I think that's probably one way to put it. It's not an expensive kit. There's not a lot of choices when you start going, what would I say, off the mainstream models. What? Spitfires, P-51s and so on. It gets pretty thin quickly. So like I say, this is an unusual kit, probably a lesser known one, and not necessarily one of the ones that people do know, but they should know. Here I am just quickly buffing my pliers, really. Use some common sense if you're doing this. These are the Tamiya ones. They're really soft, which is good because they do sharpen, but even with plastics over time, they will blunten into the kit itself. No dramas with the plastic itself. Usual stuff, just be careful with knives and things, I guess, is one of the most obvious ones. We've all done it. I did nick my finger myself on this build. I'm just coming over here with some zinc chromate. There's a lot of different sort of greens. I did look at some reference photos and they were fairly basic cockpits. There was a lot of avionics in these planes, but the cockpit itself was not complex. So really it's just what you would expect. Like you can see there, 351 in this case. I don't think you need to get too hung up on exactly which shades, but there you go. I'm giving you the ones I used. Generally, I'll use the lacquer as the base coat these days and then come across with something like the Tamiya acrylics over the top. That seems to work for me. The detail in the kit itself, it's not extravagant, but there's enough there to, what would I say, get the vibe of the aircraft, which is probably the most important thing. And especially at 172nd, I think you got to have a good reason to put a lot of work into cockpit detailing, for example. Yes, you could do it, and definitely there are times when I do it, but yeah, it's just one of those ones. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm always on the fence about it. In this case, because I'd say it was a intermediate level kit, I'm not even sure it would be worth spending too much on aftermarket parts. Again, different strokes for different folks, but in my case it was roughly $40. I could easily spend $100 just on aftermarket parts. I did add a couple little tweaks here and there, but long and short of it, I wasn't hugely interested in going to town on the cockpit. Like you can see here, I've added some basic harness simulations, I suppose, or facsimiles, just made from plain old masking tape. You can even add little buckles and things like that, but as this will just be going onto the shelf, yeah, I didn't really get that much into it. So as an example, if you wanted to, you could use lead wire and so on to add the actual wiring for VHF and IFF and all those things that are in those boxes up there. Like I say, I might even add another supplementary video because it did get me thinking as a point of principle that we all build these kits and we glue boxes and things in, often without really thinking about what it is we are gluing in. So yeah, I got a few ideas relating to that, and especially as I've learnt more, you do realize that some of these planes, like in this case, were really quite sophisticated, especially for the time. The kit itself goes together reasonably well. There's no major fit issues, but you're not looking at something like the Tamiya, say, Mark 1 Spitfire quality or anything like that. There is a few bits where you have to use what would I say, perseverance, and in this case, like you get these, what I'd say, almost annoying intermediate kit features where, like you can see there, just some cleanup. It's not a big deal. It can just become a bit frustrating at times. When you are doing these, what would I say, pods, engine pods, and I'm not sure the exact name. Be aware when you are doing it that there is a handedness to them. They do pop into place, and like I say, the fit is reasonably good, but you do need a bit of perseverance and some tape, and take your time. It'll go together well, but it's definitely not a shake and bake style kit. And you can see here there's little niggly bits, but I think the problem is once you step away from Spitfires, P-51s and so on, it just gets thin on the ground for, what would I say, options out there. I can't remember even who else does. I think maybe Trumpeter. There's not a lot of people doing this. One interesting thing I did come across, and this is that nose cone. Like I said, there's a whole history just on that nose for the radar. Originally plexiglass, then in the heat it sagged and melted, changed to fiberglass and so on. But from a kit point of view, the amount of weight this thing needs was crazy. Engine is what it is. You can see there, I've just come across with, I think, some steel, just hand brushing it. It's not something that's really going to be seen and standing out. There is a bit of fiddling around getting it to sit right in these engine nacelles, but yeah, again, just be patient. There's no big build issues in this, but just a couple little niggly ones. So you can see there how the props go on there and sit in. But yeah, interestingly, the amount of weight that I had to put in to this build is probably, it's probably the most I've ever had to do. Really quite an amazing amount of what I use is fishing sinkers, fishing weights, but I actually did have to come back and stash some in the nose gear and things like that. The thing that did confuse me a bit about it is, like you can see here, I'm loading this up with a lot of lead and it still wasn't enough. But from a purely engineering point of view, it did make me think that the real plane must have had a fair bit of weight, I guess, from the early radar in that nose cone, just getting onto almost center of gravity arguments. You can see here, this is more of that fiddly sort of cleanup work that you need to do. Again, not end of the world stuff. Just when it's, say, 11 o'clock at night and you're sort of trying to step back from day at work or whatever, yeah, it can get a bit tedious. I went with cowling color, and here's the reason why. I'm very wary of just doing solid black. Solid any color, actually, even if you get into, say, navy blues and so on. It can almost start looking toy-like if you're not careful. So I really did an experiment here with using the cowling color, which is a sort of bluish shade of black, and I was really happy with it. Rubber and tires, my standard go-to, the MiG. It just works, so I'm happy with it. I've been using it a long time. Again, this was supposed to be a quick build, but I'm not sure I'd recommend it for beginners, because while what really happens with these quick builds, you can see there on the front nose gear, is it's one piece, but that actually makes painting and finishing a bit more complicated. Here I'm just hand brushing the main tires. Yeah, again, these were pretty neat actually. If they've got a solid rim, it works well. Bit of silver to do the actual struts, or I think the oleos, or whatever the technical side of that is. And then this is what would I say, being super efficient, since I already had a bit of silver on the brush after playing with that, I come back and just did some of the wheels or the rims here just to kind of dry brush and I suppose give that effect of, what would I say, where the black paint has been slapped over is probably my thinking there. Decals, no big problems in the decals themselves. Where I do have a little bit of a grievance is the way that the decal was taped. I'm not sure how I explain this, but in some kits they'll tape down the protecting, what would I say, paper across the top. In this case, there was some tape onto the actual decal itself. I'm just sliding these onto the wing straight off the backing there. Again, works. And at this point, I'm sort of thinking of it purely in terms of this is how it's come out of the factory. So my approach here, I've used the cowling color, which at this point, even as is, I'm really quite happy with. I got no issues with, and I'd definitely do that again. Oh, that just reminded me. You can see there things like, even there's a whole story on this with the turret gun and whether it was fixed and all of that. So yeah, there's a bunch of crazy technical development and historical important developments that happened with this plane, as weird and wacky as it is. I've got a mixed feeling on this one. I wouldn't even say I enjoyed doing the kit, but I've actually learnt a lot just from doing it. So I'm just dabbing up some of the excess water. This was the Sleepy Time Gal 2. Interestingly, when I did have a look at some of these, the real prototypes, given that it was a night fighter, there was some pretty risque nose art that went on these. Oh, this is what I was telling you about, how the decals had been taped directly and it did ruin one of them. So here I am, we've gone from essentially factory showroom finish, and now I'm just coming back with some greys just to really add some tones. So you can see there it just gives that extra definition. And one of the things that I have sort of clicked to is if I hold my plane up in front of the airbrush, you can almost use the aerodynamics of the model to weather it. So I'm using road dust and a bunch of dust there, you can see, to really try and make this, not weathered. Weathering as such wasn't my main focus, but to just tone down and move away from just that solid black. The masking on this was tedious. I was really not in the mood the other day when I was masking this one. But like anything, you're patient, one step at a time. I'm definitely moving towards just buying masking. However, again, when you get into the lower end kits or lower price kits, I don't know, I'm just too tight, and my background, too much Scottish blood, so just the thought of paying $20 for masking on a $30 kit or whatever, doesn't make sense to me. I'm too tight. So you can start to see that's how it is all come together. In the end, I was actually happy with it. From a modeling point of view, I was really quite happy with how that solid black did come together. Some strange things, mixed feelings on this kit. I think it's one worth doing, but I wouldn't recommend it for a beginner. Get some experience first before you get into these weird ones. And like I say, just being a quick build, it also creates a few problems. So I do hope you've enjoyed this one. It's a nice plane. Like I say, I'll probably come back if I can, and definitely do let me know if you'd like to give some extra detail on this one. Do hit me up in the comments. Love hearing from you all. Hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one. There you are, Sleepy Time Gal. Bye for now.